Hello and welcome. I'm Jono Hayes and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. And these are our top stories this evening. The US Senate passes a crucial funding bill which could bring the longest government shutdown in history to an end. A US official announces Syria is joining the global coalition against ISIS. That's hours after President Ahmed al-Sharaa meets President Trump for historic talks at the White House. And police in India are exploring all possibilities after a deadly car explosion in Delhi kills at least 13 people. And to our first story, a crucial funding bill in the US has been passed by the Senate, which could now bring the longest government shutdown in history to an end. The bill passed in a 60-40 vote and it will now go to the House of Representatives. If it's passed there, it's going to go to the President, Donald Trump, to sign it into effect, something that he said he'd be willing to do yesterday. To discuss this and all of today's stories, we're joined in the studio by Managing Director of This Is Dubai, Michael Jabri-Pickett, and Dr. Elie Hindy, Chairperson of the Department of Security and Strategic Studies at the American University in the Emirates. Thanks to both of you for joining us. First of all, Michael, we'll turn to you in this. This is the longest shutdown in history, like we just said, finally coming to an end. But what has prompted the negotiations? Why now?
So it was a game of chicken, and the Democrats blinked first. I also believe that Chuck Schumer, who is in charge of the Democratic caucus, did not do a very good job because he either knowingly or unknowingly had 7 members plus an independent who were part of his caucus work with the Republicans. Now, that's not what a leader in the Senate should be doing. He needs to make sure that everybody sticks to the party line. And the Democrats, you remember, this was 5 days after not just an incredible moral victory, but in every Republican instance where they could have lost, they won. Mayor of New York, Governor of New Jersey and Virginia, Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, as well as a key race in Georgia. And California as well with the Prop 50. So they won across the board. And then 5 days later, they caved. And that's the only way that you can put it, because what they've achieved is not representative of what you should have achieved after a 42-day government shutdown.
So it does beg the question, because we're not there yet, Dr. Elie, as well. I mean, there's still the House to go to, still to go to Trump for signing as well. Things will go back to normal, but it's going to take some time before we get back to any sense of normality.
That's true. As you said in the introduction, it goes to the House of Representatives, where a lot of discussion is going to happen there too. It's not obvious that the same bill is going to be passed as is. There will be discussion, there will be negotiations, and there will be, again, an attempt to keep the party line as much as possible. And continuing with what Michael was saying, we saw 7 Democrats vote with the bill, but 1 Republican vote against the bill also. So that's why they needed the 8 votes with the additional independent. How many representatives that are Republican in the House have already declared that they don't support the bill as it is? There are few of them. But definitely it's the same bet. It's the bet that they will hold the line and that the Republicans, with few others, will be able to push it through with as little time as possible. But this could take a week, days, maybe more. We have to wait and see.
So at earliest, we're looking at Monday.
At earliest, Trump said the first session is hopefully going to be Wednesday afternoon, and then discussions will start after that. At least few days, maybe more. Trump said potentially on Monday, but it could be longer than that. We have to wait and see. The good thing is that once it is there, Trump will sign it immediately, and then immediately the people will start to feel the relief of the things putting back in process every aspect of government.
Michael, let's look at the language that was used by President Trump, who says that he broke the party. That's what he said. That's what he's saying, that he thinks he broke the party. Using language like that is you think it's intentionally used to try and diminish what the Democrats have been trying to do here? Do you think it's trying to say, listen, I won, you blinked first, which is what you said at the very start of this, and effectively portray himself as the winner of this debacle that's gone on for far too long?
So let's look at it from a sports analogy. There are great athletes who love to win, and then there are other great athletes who hate to lose. I would say that Donald Trump is somebody who hates to lose. And in this particular instance, I think he would use every opportunity to run down the Democrats, not so much to take credit for a victory, but to run down the Democrats and to use this as an opportunity to say they're weak, they're in a midst of chaos, they don't have a clear strategy, they don't know what they're doing. This is what he likes to hit them with. And quite frankly, in this particular case, I think he would be incredibly successful, and it would resonate because there doesn't seem to be a clear strategy. The Democrats did seem to have a clear strategy, certainly going into elections on Tuesday, a week ago, but now they seem to be back in disarray.
It's not good news if we go back into this again, which is very much a possibility, Dr. Elie. If we get to January, and if the Democrats feel like this perhaps is not going how they wanted it to go, we could see this happen all over again, which is bad news for 41 million Americans who are on SNAP funding.
Definitely. If I may, just before we go into that, just to comment on what Michael was saying. We remember Trump saying we lost the election because of the shutdown. So definitely the party who is in power, who, as you were saying before the show, who controls the House, the Senate, the White House, will be blamed for the larger failure in that sense. So Trump is not going to be enthusiastic about another shutdown. He already had 2 in his previous term, and now the longest in the US history. I don't think he's going to cause a big trouble in January or later on. However, the Democrats who are winning, who are gaining some points, and who do feel emboldened with the extremist group being more and more aggressive, they might want to cause some chaos. They might want to mark some points against Trump. Will they have enough power to do that in January or later on? We have to wait and see. But I think the Republicans would not be going in for a fight. They would rather prepare themselves and start reaping some of the Trump policies' effects before the midterm elections of next November.
Did we see much of a knock-on effect in terms of markets, Michael, with this shutdown? Because we know we've seen in daily values with people who are on the ground who are suffering, not just people who aren't in offices, but people who are your everyday hard-working Americans or people who are not working and maybe on benefits. These are the people who seem to have suffered most. But the markets, how have they done?
So one of the issues that you could boil it down to one word why the Democrats did so well in elections a week ago, and it was the talk about affordability. They kept hammering that. Donald Trump, in a recent Sunday evening interview, questioned that. And he thinks that everything's going incredibly well. Now, Donald Trump assesses affordability by how well the markets are performing. There was one Gallup poll recently that found that only about 61% of Americans, either directly or through their 401ks, have any investment in the stock market. The stock market is doing incredibly well, but from an affordability point of view, from what people are looking at when they go into the grocery store and they're buying eggs, which is the one item that consistently gets used, there is an increase that people are experiencing. Things are more expensive than they once were. And this is where Donald Trump is slowly starting to change his language so that it is something that is applicable, to your point, for your average American. So the markets in general, the stock market, no real discernible change because of the government shutdown. But I think people were noticing that there was a difference, even if it was they didn't have as much money as they used to have because things are getting more and more expensive.
Which makes perfect sense. Dr. Elie and Michael, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. We're going to move on to our next story. A US official has said that Syria is joining the global coalition against ISIS. The announcement was made just hours after President Donald Trump welcomed his Syrian counterpart, Ahmed al-Sharaa, for historic talks at the White House. Now, after their meeting, al-Sharaa also told Fox News Channel's special report that his association with the al-Qaeda militant group was a matter of the past and was not discussed in Monday's meeting with the US president. Here's a little listen of some of what he had to say.
Only 19 years old, so I was a very young person, and it didn't have any decision-making power at that time, and I don't have anything to do with it. And Al-Qaeda was not present right then in my area. So you're speaking to the wrong person about this subject. We mourn for every civilian that got killed, and we know that people suffer from the war, especially civilians who pay the price, a hefty price for the war. We talked about the president and the future. We talked about the investment opportunities in the future in Syria, and so that Syria is no longer looked at as a security threat. It is now looked at as a geopolitical ally, and it's a place where the United States can have great investments, especially extracting gas.
Dr. Elie, that is history that we're watching right there. First of all, a Syrian president in the White House. It's never happened before. Also a man who previously fought the US, now been welcomed by a president of the United States and joining together to combat the Islamic State group.
Definitely a first, as you said, definitely a historic moment, but not because it is a person who fought against the US is now in the White House, because we've seen that before, but more because it is a person who has a history in ISIS, in al-Qaeda, who is now joining the US to fight ISIS in that sense. So it is all the background history of that guy. It is how he made it so fast, such a big change. To be received in the White House with such privilege is posing a lot of questions, a lot of doubts, and so on. But definitely this person, this new leadership in Syria is doing something right. They are trying to appeal to all the different major powers in the region and in the world. They are saying what they are supposed to say, and they are claiming that they want to do what they are supposed to do. Have we seen actual effect on the ground or actual implementation? Very little so far. There are a lot of question marks, a lot of red flags, in my opinion, but still he is definitely going in the right direction and taking Syria in the right direction.
Well, time will tell with regards to what direction he's taking it, I guess, and what he's doing on the ground. But Michael, with regards to the US public, and again, as Dr. Elie said, bringing somebody in who has formerly been a foe of the nation is not overly unusual for this administration. But what is unusual is that we're now seeing this palsy-walsy connection between both Syria and the US that we haven't seen before. How have the US public kind of reacted to that? Is there trepidation about al-Sharaa and his history?
So I just want to say, in that Fox interview, when he talked about that was in the past, let's remind everyone that it was less than a year ago that he had a $10 million bounty on his head by the US government.
He didn't say how far in the past, to be fair.
He did not. You're absolutely right. I think that the White House, if they wanted this to receive as little attention as possible, they got lucky because the US government shutdown was coming to an end, and that took over a lot of what the media were covering. Also because the Syrian leader went into the White House through the side door. There wasn't the traditional press spray, as there often is, where Donald Trump takes questions. It was photographs that were released after the fact. These were all working to the White House's advantage if they didn't want the American people to question it too much. But I also don't believe that the American people would have been too fussed about this, because I don't know that they would necessarily have known a lot of the more controversial aspects to his past. But what the U.S. is doing is, to Dr. Elie's point, I think exactly what leaders in the GCC want, which is they would like Syria to be embraced by the international community. And to his credit, the Syrian leader is in fact doing everything that he can. But the international community and the U.S. have to take that trust but verify approach, which is trust him, but then they have to make sure that they're verifying everything that it is he says he will do, so that they can in fact make sure that they repeal the Caesar Act, for instance, so that then there can be U.S. investment in Syria, which is what everybody wants, so that the country becomes much more successful than it has been over 14 years of civil war, and then of course the 53 years under the Assads.
Dr. Elie, the reason, and because Michael mentioned it there may be a reason we didn't have that pomp and ceremony that we normally would have with a world leader visiting the White House.
True. First, because he is not a full-on legitimate president that has been elected, and there's no constitution and there's no pure legal legitimacy. Still, so far, he is as per the constitution, the head of the transitional power in Syria, and the constitution is just an initial declaration for now, waiting to be written. That's definitely all things taken into consideration. That's why maybe the different arrangements in the White House. But then again, continuing with what Michael was mentioning, I may not doubt his willingness to do what he's saying he will, but I will definitely doubt his ability to deliver on all the promises that he is doing. It's a very complex situation. It's a very complex past of components and of groups coming together, of militant groups coming together. And we have to remember and put in our mind that this army that he claims will be part of fighting ISIS has as part of it several former emirs of ISIS and of al-Qaeda as now part of the military fraction of the new Syrian military. Will he be able to control those? Will they be able to deliver on the promise to fight ISIS? All of these dynamics, let alone the other dynamics of sectarian groups, the Kurds, the Druze, and all of that. There's a lot of doubts on how much he can deliver. He is definitely saying all the right things, and we're waiting to see how application will go from there on.
Michael, this could open the floodgates of inward investment into Syria, which would mean big things for Damascus, it would mean big things for Syria, and that is likely to be on the cards with the US backing them, right? This is something that really could happen.
It definitely could. And as I said, with the Caesar Act, if that can be repealed, it's been suspended for another 180 days.
Yeah.
And I think once that actually is dissolved, then you will get US investment. But I think you'll also, in the meantime, have the Syrian diaspora trying to invest as much money as they possibly can. You're going to have so many Syrian refugees from neighboring countries wanting to go back. And then, of course, there's so many who have made it to the West who are going to want to send money, who are going to want to reinvest that money back into their country, because it now seems not just to be going down the road where it's going to be more stable, but you're going to have real U.S. involvement and a president who seems genuinely interested in making sure that he's engaged with the leader of the country.
Before we move on, Dr. Elie, good news for Syria, but also great news for the US potentially. Damascus, historically tied with Moscow and with Tehran as well. Surely US involvement and a military base which has been touted near Damascus is nothing but good news.
Definitely. They are now, we know that they have already the Tanaf base that is on the three border of Iraq, Jordan and Syria. Now they're speaking about a base that is close to Damascus, that oversees the situation, that plays as a front line for any further operations in the region. It's definitely key for the US, but it also puts Syria in a precarious situation because we have Turkish soldiers, we have Israeli soldiers, we have talks with the Russians to renew their bases in the coast. So all this combination, will it remain to be stable or will it explode at a certain time with the lack of coordination between all these powers present in Syria?
Just another week in Washington. Thanks to both of you for your thoughts on that. We're going to move on to our next story. Police in India are exploring all possibilities after an explosion in Delhi killed at least 13 people while 20 have been injured. There's no official confirmation yet on what caused the blast, which occurred when a slow-moving vehicle stopped at a red light on Monday. Chris Gilbert has this report.
Grief struck Delhi on Tuesday as families mourned loved ones killed in a fiery explosion the day before. The blast occurred near the historic Red Fort on Monday evening, a rare occurrence in the heavily guarded city of more than 30 million people. The 17th century monument is usually visited by thousands of tourists daily and is now closed for 3 days as investigations proceed. Officials say they've identified a number of the dead and post-mortems are being carried out. Several states and key facilities across the country have been placed on high alert as police investigate under India's major anti-terrorism laws. They say the investigation is ongoing.
Once we are able to find out hard facts, then only we will be able to comment upon it conclusively.
First responders at the scene say it was gruesome.
When we reached the blast site, we could find only bodies. The bodies were in parts, and we had to pick different parts and bring them back in the ambulances to the hospital.
Members of the police forensic team have been working throughout Tuesday to survey the area as armed guards patrolled the site. Foreign experts are also on site seeking evidence. Relatives of the victims gathered outside the Loknayak hospital early on Tuesday seeking information on the victims of the blast.
We tried to call him but couldn't reach out to him. Authorities told us to come to the hospital. When we came here, we had to identify the body. They didn't allow us in easily, but eventually we got in for identification. We'll proceed with the post-mortem.
The government says the police investigation will soon be made public. The defense minister is vowing those responsible will be brought to justice. Security has been tightened all across Delhi. World leaders from Egypt, the US, the EU, France and Iran have expressed their sympathies online. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is currently travelling in Bhutan, but says he has held discussions with the Defence Minister and sends his condolences to the families of the victims. Chris Gilbert, Arabiya, English.
Devastating scenes. Michael, what do we know about this blast, but also what do we know about who is being held responsible at this time?
So at this point, we're not sure. There's a lot of speculation. The government certainly isn't coming out and 100% saying it's this party or it's this country. As the report says, 13 dead, 20 injured. We know that airports and train stations heightened security. We do know that in front of the Red Fort, in the evening, there was a slow-moving Hyundai that stopped at a red light and then blew up. It seems, I think we can safely say that it was probably a suicide bombing. There is too much speculation as to who was driving and where that person might have been from. I think it's safer to say that what the police have done now is they've invoked the anti-terrorism law, again, as the report said. What that means is that they can conduct raids, as they have been doing, and they have a little bit more freedom to go about trying to investigate without necessarily having to worry about everybody's rights under the non-anti-terrorism laws.
The concern with this is that is an explosion at something of such magnitude as well, and that's quite an important area for that to happen, Dr. Elie. How have the public reacted to it happening and to the location at which it happened and why that's so instrumental?
It's definitely the capital, first of all, and then in front of a monumental place. But also it is during elections, where regional elections are happening in Bihar and in specifically the parliament and the Congress of that area. If you put this in all the contexts, we have to see how much there is anger growing against the Modi government, how much opposition is growing against the Modi government, and how they will react in accusing the Modi government of not doing well on security issues, and then invocating terrorism laws that will allow them to, again, do less procedures and so on, might raise the anger even more in that sense. But still, since we don't have the finger pointing towards Pakistan or other players in the region, we're still not sure if it is an internal growing opposition turning militant, which would be really dangerous and new to a certain extent, or is it an external interference as it has been the rhetoric regularly before?
The word from Narendra Modi is that they will find who's responsible for this as well. Is he in a precarious situation at the moment, especially when elections are taking place, Michael, like this, and something of this magnitude occurs? All eyes will be on Narendra Modi and his government right now. Is he, in some ways, there's some parting at the seams in Modi's government at the moment, or do you think he seems to be fairly stable?
I think he's in a pretty stable position. I think he has an awful large power base throughout the country. It's not just pockets. He has consistently shown that he is the leader for India at this time in its history. He's done well, and he, I think, speaks to a nationalistic pride that Indians have, and he seems to come forward in moments like this, either when it's trying to court the US president or when he's trying to help raise up the morale within the country. I think he consistently does a nice job of speaking to the everyman and what their fears are, maybe to a fault sometimes where he leans into those fears a little bit too much. But for the most part, I think he has captured the spirit of what it means to be, Indian at this time in the history of their country.
And he's hugely popular as well. You have to remember how hugely popular he truly is. And anytime we mention Narendra Modi on the show, videos go through the roof because he does have such a huge following as well. I guess the question now is, what if it's not an inside job, so to speak? Dr. Elie, what if this is a neighbouring country that may have inflicted this attack?
It is definitely a complex situation with two countries that we know have been in constant regular instability and challenge and conflict and confrontation and so on. But again, the Pakistani authorities have been extremely clear, as they have always been. This is not us, this is not our role, and this is not through our support. They could always claim that it is, a rogue asset that is doing something and so on, or a Kashmiri rebel group that is trying to make a point. I don't think neither powers is currently at a stage to want to escalate that into another confrontation. Pakistan is too busy with the conflict with Afghanistan and what's happening on the border. India is, again, I think Modi is busy with consolidating his power, preparing for the next election, avoiding any opposition from forming. But then again, on the international scene, managing the relations with the US, renewing the relation with China, and so on. Both parties have too much to lose. Unfortunately, things could go still out of hand if things escalate in that direction, but it is unlikely so far, at least.
The perpetrators of this attack, Michael, and as you said, it's all speculation with regards to who it might be. Do you think, and obviously any loss of life is tragic and is awful, normally the Red Fort attracts 8,000 to 10,000 visitors every single day, so on the grand scheme of things, this is a relatively small death toll in relation to how high this could have been. Is that something that you think now the government will be looking at and saying, we've limited the number of casualties, but it needs to be at zero?
I just think that it means that the people who perpetrated this knew what they were doing, and they wanted to achieve the greatest effect as possible. And by the greatest effect, I mean the greatest number of dead and the largest number of casualties. The Red Fort it means so much to the Indian psyche. It is where the first Indian Prime Minister gave an Independence Day speech in 1947, and it is where each year in August, Indian Prime Ministers go back and deliver a speech. So they know that this Red Fort represents what it means to Indians, how it's so important to their national pride, and it's also in a very crowded area, a pedestrian street, close to a metro station as well. So if they wanted to kill as many people as possible, to put a blunt force object in front of people, I think that is exactly what they were hoping to do, and this is where they would have done it.
Michael, Dr. Elie, thanks for your thoughts on that. We're going to move on to our next story, something a lot lighter. Should there be a limit on how many times you sit your driving test or even your theory test? Well, the AA driving school in the UK has just revealed that one learner took their driver theory test, wait for it, 128 times without success. With the theory test costing around £20, that means that this particular learner has spent around £3,000 without progressing on to the next stage, which is the practical exam. So the good news is they're not actually behind the wheel of a car. This, Dr. Elie, is terrifying. It's a persistent person. Would you just at this stage have said, you know what, I might give up on the idea of driving, I might just get a bike?
That's definitely a persistent person that should not be behind the wheels. Please give up. If you cannot make it after 137 times, please, your place is not behind the wheels. There's something definitely not clicking there, and definitely you should find for other options to make your way through life without insisting
take a bus.
on that. Take the bus, take the bike, whatever could be suitable.
I mean, to talk you through what it is. So the theory test is in some countries, quite a few actually, whereby you will first of all sit a exam which tests you on your knowledge of all things related to the road, be it the speed limits and how you should braking distance in wet roads. Having taken that many, many years ago, I can tell you that the questions are very, very similar. The answers are very, very similar, and it's 4 or 5 multiple choice options. So I can understand how there would be some slight confusion on this. However, is there really a need for a theory test, Michael? It's 2025 at the end of the day. Is there not some different way we could do this? Could we not all be wearing Vision Pros and just saying, do the theory test in this, or a simulator of some description?
No. If you're going to drive, you're going to have to do a practical test and you have to do a theory test. I think it helps separate the people who should be behind the wheel from the people who are not smart enough to know how to pass the test. It doesn't matter the country that you're in. You're going to be given a booklet. The booklet is not going to be that challenging. You could memorize it, for heaven's sakes.
Yep.
The test itself, as it was in Canada, I assume it's the same, it's multiple choice. There are, 25, 30 questions? Yeah. Not that difficult. So if you don't have the basic intelligence to pass this after, 2 or 3 times, then you should not be driving. I will also say that having a driver's license is not a human right. It is not your God-given right. It is not something that is written into the Constitution that you should be able to do in any country. So I think that the authorities should make tests as difficult as they can when it comes to theory, and also when it comes to getting behind the wheel and doing it with the instructor in the car.
But then are you okay with more than 50% of the people failing the test?
Is that the first time round fail rate? It's almost 50%, right?
I think so, yeah.
I'm okay with that. I think if you're going to get behind the wheel of a car and you could kill somebody, yes, I think the challenge should be to make it as difficult as possible. In fact, I think we can all agree, no matter what country you're living in, that there are too many bad drivers out there. And maybe the bar should be raised a little bit, and maybe more people, to your point, should be taking the bus or a bicycle.
So, and just to put it into context, Albert Einstein failed science. Thomas Edison was never quite, theoretically speaking at least, wasn't very good at the theory of what he did, but he knew what he was doing. He was good at the abstract part of science. All these people were considered to be not theoretically very good. Henry Ford, James Dyson, Steve Jobs, they've all got a track record. Not great at the theory, very good at the practical point of view. Are you saying that somebody needs to be both in order to be behind the wheel of a car? Because the questions are very similar, and I know it's a long time since I took it, but when you're asking somebody and the wording is ever so slightly different, and maybe English is not their first language and they're sitting this exam, does it then become something where you think, well, maybe you need to have the actual skills, and that's why some sort of a VR option might be better?
So maybe a VR option might be better for them, absolutely, but that's not the way it's set up now. So you have to play by the rules that are put in front of you. And if this gentleman or this woman has failed 128 times, I think is the number.
Yep.
Then I think that should be the universe telling you that maybe you should not be a driver.
Dr. Elie, I guess it's something that might be in the next couple of years redundant, and I don't know if our kids or our grandkids are going to be necessarily sitting a driving test for a car that's going to drive itself. And I just saw videos during the week from a trade show, which is currently on, where the driverless autonomous taxi just pulls up, picks you up and takes you to your place of work or wherever you're on the way to.
There will be more ways for people to transport from one place to the other. That's why you should not insist on driving.
We really don't just want this person on the road. I think that's what we're saying.
Unless you are really good at it. I mean, they said also, I mean, other people who failed 77 times and 37 times and 80 times and so on. So it's not only one person case. There's definitely some difficulty to that test. But my question is, do you, if you have a test that's regularly failing more than half of the people, should you review the test or not? Maybe the ways that the test is given, but then obviously after a certain time, in Australia, I know for sure when you fail, you need to wait for a period of time and then maybe wait more if you fail more times. This will definitely regulate things out. But the new ways of doing the test, definitely. New ways of transportation other than driving, by all means. This is coming and this is going to be part of our life.
And roads change, and I think from the three of us in the studio, I certainly would have no issue with saying that and I know when I resit the driving test, and I've done it as an experiment, I failed within the first 30 seconds. And I'm sure that, admit it or not, we have picked up some bad habits along the way. That means we probably would fail the driving test. Now, should we be retested every couple of years, Michael?
I believe so. In Canada, you could get your driver's license, at least when I was getting mine at 16. And I would think that, say, every 10 years. When I moved to the UAE in 2003, I got my driver's license for 20 years. And I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. Now, if I ever go back to my home country, I know, because my Canadian driver's license has expired, that I'm going to have to sit. I don't know if I'll have to do the theory, but I'll have to do the practical. And I think I'm an incredibly good driver, which means I probably will fail many times because I know, to your point, I've probably picked up an awful lot of bad habits over the years. I've had to navigate Sheikh Zayed Road. We know how difficult that can be. And I think that if, again, in Canada, once you hit the age of 80, you'll need a medical certificate, and then you'll have to take your practical test every 2 years. So society and the authorities are aware that people will develop bad habits and that sometimes we might not be as good a driver as we think we are. So why not introduce that from an incredibly early age where it's just standard practice? Say every 5 or 10 or 3 or 7 years, you have to go back in and you have to do the test again.
Yeah. I think
above 60 maybe, but I mean at any age, you'd still want to have the test redone.
I think it's good to keep you fresh and to keep you aware that so that you
maybe
can...
new rules have come up, maybe new signs are used.
I think it's more to knock the bad habits that we've developed.
Absolutely.
The number of times where I thought I can make that,
or
I probably shouldn't
it's just
be
the basics.
that.
10 and 2. It's 10 and 2. Who remembers that anymore?
Right.
Not many of us.
Right. Okay.
Back in the day. You're still supposed to drive like that, by the way, not one-handed with your seat reclined. It's that time of the show where we move on to stories that Michael and Dr. Elie have found from online, some of the quirkier stories of the day. Michael, yours is about a man who took an ice cream challenge that doesn't sound like my idea of a fun day out. Tell us all about this.
I don't know if I'll be able to tell this in as little time as it took him to complete and set a Guinness World Record. So James Clark, a man from Minnesota, was traveling in Ireland, and he was determined to set a Guinness World Record. He knew that he had to consume, I'm trying to get there, this ice cream that weighed 130 grams in less than 30 seconds. Now, the record had been 24.97 seconds. He did it in 24.72 seconds. And apparently, also, he has now set, according to Mr. Clark, 35 Guinness World Records. And he did this one at Teddy's, which is a shop that's been around since 1950.
The question is why?
I think because of a moment like this, some people just want that opportunity. As Andy Warhol said, you know, they wanted 15 minutes, 15 seconds of fame.
Here we go. 15 seconds of fame multiplied by 35. He's done well.
And there, don't you think he's either going through brain freeze or maybe
This gentleman needs to be
might be coming
hospitalised.
back up?
Again, it's a lot. It's a lot to take on. It doesn't seem like a lot, 130 grams of ice cream. But then again, anyone who's had their vagus nerves simulated when you are having an ice cream, which is what causes that brain freeze, will be aware of how difficult it will be to get through that particular challenge while that's going on. So you got to take
Definitely,
your
we're
hat off.
seeing some weird Guinness records recently, and people are inventing new ways of getting Guinness records by doing weird stuff or simply twisting a certain test in a way that gets them the Guinness. I don't know if that's a good thing, but people will do
Well,
it.
it gives
and,
us something to
and
talk
we will,
about.
We will talk
Well,
about it.
it gives us something for the end of the show, so we'll find the positives, I guess, more than anything else.
Indeed.
Dr. Elie, let's move on to your story. The next generation, while they're doomed when it comes to text or writing, fonts, anything whatsoever, it'll all be done via speech.
I think humanity is doomed. We're deteriorating by generation. It's becoming really critical now. The news that we have, the story that we have, is that LSE, London School of Economics, a new research and study shows that all the alpha generation are going to most probably be using computers without a keyboard. So they will be dictating to the computer whatever message or email or anything they want to do. My question is, what will they be doing if everything is going to be done to them? If they're going to be, driven, if they don't walk, if they don't study because AI does it for them, if they don't type because there's a voice message for that, and all of this, what are they going to be doing? What will be their skills? What will be their human skills, their human interaction? We are heading in the wrong direction in that sense. I don't think technology is necessarily adding the value of what we produce. It's simply making us lose skills that we should have, that I think every human being should have.
So for Gen Alpha, we're talking about kids who were born 2010 right through to 2025. So these kids are coming up on 15 now, or perhaps have just been born and they'll be coming up.
I'll have them at uni in a couple of years.
Lucky you. But in saying that, somebody had this conversation the other day with me, someone who works in AI, and said AI is only as good as the prompt that you put into it. So are we now educating the generation of people who just need to be able to prompt AI better? And that becomes the new thing to do.
We're definitely teaching students how to prompt AI because they're doing it anyway, they're using it anyway, so please use it properly and make the best use of that technology that you have, not to do the work for you, but to help you do the work better and faster in that sense, be it a research or a speech or whatever you are writing. I'm all for that. But unfortunately, we know that the majority of people will not use it in this way. Will use it simply to do less work and be more lazy, unfortunately.
Or are they using it so their brain power can be used elsewhere to come up with something perhaps more creative, whereby they don't need to take up the empty space in there from minuscule things that ChatGPT can do?
But I also think that, to your point about we're losing skills, penmanship, being able to write in cursive. I think that I know that I struggle sometimes if I go too long without having actually written. And I think that younger generations will also struggle because they will not have that skill that was there for many, many years when they first started.
We are losing vocab, we are losing typos, the grammar.
We're losing the ability to.
Definitely.
I couldn't cash a check the other day. It took me 3 hours and to go and change my signature physically because I couldn't match the digital signature that I create every single day. And I just think, well, that's where we've reached in life.
But can you imagine like 20 people in a shared space dictating to their computers with a loud voice? Yeah. What kind of an environment that would create?
And also the skill of an instructor. I remember having to write, 1,500 100-word papers by hand.
Yeah.
And the instructors would have, or the professors would have had to have been reading that, and my penmanship was not that good that it would have been easy. So certainly it's probably easier for the teacher to grade, but there is a skill there. I know when I've been in situations, there's one restaurant that I'll go to occasionally, and they have props on the desk, and they have the old rotary telephone. And I've been there when parents have been with their children, and they've said to their children, do you know what that is?
And the
do you know how
students
to
would
use
have
it?
no clue.
They have no idea what it is, and they have no idea how to use it.
The next generation aren't going to know what Nokia phones were, and that's a terrifying thought to have. Well, thanks to both of you so much for joining us. To tonight's guest, Managing Director of This Is Dubai, Michael Jabri-Pickett, and Dr. Elie al-Hindy, Chairperson of the Department of Security and Strategic Studies at the American University in the Emirates. Thanks to both of you. And that's all from us on W News Extra. Don't forget, as always, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. GNT with Tom Burgess Watson is coming up next. Leanne will be back tomorrow night. Goodbye.